Vella Panti, an online house party for people with disabilities, every Saturday, April 2020.
Session 2, April 11, 2020. A screening on consent.
I'm Nidhi Goyal. I am the founder and executive director of Rising Flame. We're very glad that you could join us today in the session 2 of our event series called Vella Panti. Vella Panti is basically born from the need of the hour with the isolation that many of us were facing, with the kind of morals that were going down, with the fear, the anxiety that is surrounding us. We really wanted, and the way we were feeling about not staying connected, we really thought it's time for us to continue some conversations, to have an intentional step to stay connected, to continue to build empathy, because for us, going forward in the new normal, in the world that will change, empathy is something that will have to remain constant or maybe grow even more. So, with that intention, we designed a series called Vellapanti, which is a series that will come to you every Saturday with different ideas to connect. So, last week we had a book reading session where two essays by two authors were read, and there was a discussion around that. We read chapters from The 11 Ways to Love, authored by Nadika Naja and me, Nidhi Goyal. And then we had a discussion on the kinds of love that we see in the world and how we connect, what relationships mean to all of us. We thought as a step to our session two, following our session one around the book reading, it would be very interesting for us to screen some short films on an issue that is much talked about, understood or comprehended by a few. A lot of people struggle to understand what consent means and want to proactively build some more, um, you know, understand through different narratives what it really could be. What are the different shades of consent? Are there shades to consent? What does it mean when you're in a relationship or not in a relationship? And what does consent mean otherwise? Because in the disability rights movement, consent is really at the heart of a lot of work that we do, but it's never articulated in that way. So it's only if the gender justice and disability rights, when they come together, does the concept of consent become even more deeper for us people with disabilities. So let's watch today. As we are planning, we will be screening a couple of films. The first film on consent is by Weiss, and it'll be followed by a couple of short films made by PLD, Partners for Law and Development, in India. And those films, the four films that'll follow, are in Hindi. They are short films, means they're about 3 minutes long. The first film is by Weiss is about 30 minutes in length. And so after 30 minutes, it'll be followed by four films in 3 minutes each. Those films are in Hindi. The first film is in English, but the Hindi films do have English subtitles. We have a sign language interpreter here to make the call accessible for deaf persons and persons who are hard of hearing. We are happy to walk you through the Zoom platform for those who are particularly screen reader users, blind and low vision individuals. We're trying to make this conversation as inclusive as possible. So our language will be inclusive and we'll try our best. If there is something that feels difficult for you, please feel free to raise it during our discussion. Just to walk folks through the platform, and then we'll also talk about our speakers. So we're basically on the Zoom platform where screen reader users actually either can navigate through their phones or their desktops, and there are clear buttons around which, so if you see there's a participant button, and if you click that, you will see a list of participants. You could privately message them or send a message that will reach all of us. There's also a more button which will enable you raise your hand if you wanted to intervene, etc. Of course, there's a mute and unmute button, and we'd strongly encourage all participants to keep themselves muted. There is an option to start your video or stop your video. Again, when we're watching the films, everyone's strongly encouraged to switch off their videos, including our sign language interpreter, because we do have our films are captioned / subtitled. So this is about accessibility. And as I said, if you have any specific requests, our team members on the call are Srinidhi Raghavan. You can see her in the chat list as Srinidhi, and Arjita Mittal, who can be found in the chat list as Rising Flame. As the host, and of course you could message me. You can find me in the chat list as Nidhi Goyal. Our films will take about 45 minutes, but we also have two fabulous speakers, and I'll introduce them in a bit after the films. But we have some amazing speakers who work on the spectrum of disability or gender, disability, sexuality, technology, consent, and so on. So really looking forward to the discussions, but we will begin with the screenings. I'm just going to pause for a second because we're a lot of us, and if anybody has any questions, yes, one important accessibility feature that I forgot to mention is that Srinidhi Raghavan, again, my colleague from Rising Flame, will be live audio describing the portions, because these films, the filmmakers have not audio described the films, but we did not want to leave the films out just because there wasn't audio description available. Instead, we found a way to make it accessible for blind and low vision persons through live audio description. So I hope that works for everyone as well. If there are any questions, I'll pause for about 10-20 seconds, and then I'll request Arjita to start the first film. Okay, brilliant. There are lots of people still joining in. Welcome to the call. I think at this point, because we're just about to start, I do also want to share that this is a public meeting. So as you see, the link was public, which means we also want to leave the access on for people who could not make it today and would like to watch and listen to some of the discussions later. So what we're going to do is we would be recording the call, but we're not live relaying it anywhere. So in case at any point in the discussion you feel uncomfortable to raise a question or you do not want to be identified, you can just start by saying, I do not want this portion to be in the public domain, and we will edit it out when we're putting out the videos. I hope that's okay. If anybody has any issues, again, feel free to write on the group chat, to unmute yourself now, or to message any of our team members, Arjita, Srinidhi, or Nidhi, that's me, privately. And also we'll be doing some social media around the film screening, around the discussions, where nobody will be named except our speakers. So I also just wanted to reach out to the speakers to say if you'd be okay and if you consent to being on social media or being tagged on social media, and others, if you're okay that the discussions go out, but not really with your name, so not attributed to anybody. Again, you have the flexibility that at any point, if you feel that it is something that you don't want even unattributed to go out on social media, please do let us know, and we'll take care of that. I think somebody has messaged that they do not understand Hindi. Can I please request the person to either message Srinidhi privately their access needs, because if you don't live with blindness or low vision, then there are subtitles, but if you live with blindness or low vision, we can find a way out to translate it for you as well, but we'll have to be creative about it. Anyway, the screenings in Hindi are about 10 to 12 minutes. The large chunk is 30 minutes in English. So I hope we can start here. Thank you once again for joining Vella Panti's session 2, a screening on consent. And I'd request my colleague Arjita, please, if you could start the film by Weiss.
HBO programming. There's a chair and a woman dressed in a flowery dress sits down on it.
Can you tell us about a sexual encounter where consent was an issue?
Yeah,
think over the course of my life, as with a lot of my friends, and I'm sure a lot of women, there have been many.
It was my freshman year. It was around the fall, so I just got settled into my dorm room.
I was very drunk, and I asked a friend for a ride home.
I liked this person liked me, and you begin to make out.
He started kissing me, and I was like, okay, that's all right.
And then all of a sudden it's an energy shift.
But then he started to undress me, and
he had his hand on my head and he kind of like pushed it.
And it becomes less about you as a person and more of you as a thing.
He had just sort of put himself inside me without me saying anything. And then when I started saying no, he sort of was like, shh.
In my head, I was like, no. But,
no was never really a factor in whether or not it was going to happen.
I felt like if I kept trying, that something worse would happen. So I eventually just kind of let it happen.
Every single woman I know has stories like that where she just sort of let her body be used because it was just easier or it felt safer.
I remember when I was about 18 and there was this guy who was a friend of mine who I just thought was the most beautiful person in the world. And we had gone out one night, we'd been drinking a lot. And it wasn't until I kind of turned around and saw him naked and he started taking my clothes off and pushing my head down that I realized that not a tiny part of me wanted to do that. I remember saying to him, I don't really want to have sex. And I also remember him kind of taking that as a cue to convince me. It's only really now that this moment of cultural reckoning has come about that I think so many of us are thinking about our own experiences and our own sexual encounters. And it's those kind of conversations, most of which have been taking place behind closed doors between myself and my friends, that I thought, it's a good time to explore what consent really means, which is the reason I wanted to make this documentary.
In white letters on a black screen.
Hello.
Aren't you in the wrong room, Mr. Bond?
Growing up, I learned about love and romance through movies like James Bond, where the heroes spend their time in the relentless pursuit of women, which is seen as a sexy ideal. But off-screen, Hollywood itself has been changing.
Now to the latest on Harvey Weinstein. The New York Times reporting allegations by numerous women who say
Nearly a year ago, the Harvey Weinstein scandal unleashed a flood of allegations that became known as the Me Too movement. It began with stories of workplace sexual harassment that implicated scores of powerful men and impacted countless institutions around the world, including Vice. In this moment of extraordinary reckoning, these personal encounters could have enormous political consequences.
Major breaking news about Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation.
A woman says the president's U.S. Supreme Court nominee assaulted her when she and Kavanaugh were both in high school.
But Me Too has also created a more nuanced cultural debate. For me, it was one woman's anonymous account of a confusing sexual encounter with the actor Aziz Ansari that hit a nerve, begging the question, what constitutes sexual consent? Jessica Bennett, gender editor at the New York Times, explained why this story stood out from the rest. What were your thoughts when the Aziz Ansari expose came out?
I've been in this situation, and most people I know have too. Journalistically, I thought there were a lot of problems with how the reporting was done, how it was delivered. But that case opened up a really important conversation that needed to happen alongside or within Me Too at large, which is that there are these sort of murkier, gray area situations.
To be honest, I think that a lot of us, myself included, hadn't really thought about it until the Aziz Ansari thing came out. And then it was like, oh, was that situation?
Yeah. I think a lot of us all genders are looking back on past experiences with a new lens now. And you can't really put this back to the way it was. Like, Harvey Weinstein began this conversation, but it's not a new conversation.
The Me Too movement actually began in communities of color, years before Harvey Weinstein's A-list accusers propelled it to international infamy.
Hello? Hello? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen! How many of you are ready for a great night?
Michelle Hope is a sexologist whose mission is to bring the movement right back to where it started.
Some of you might be like, wait a minute, what is a sexologist? And bitch, where did you go to school? Dick sucking university? But in all actuality, I look at how human sexuality plays a part in our daily lives. So now I got the nerdy shit out the way. Let's talk about pussy.
We joined her during a live taping of the popular sex podcast, Horrible Decisions, where she was the special guest.
So what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna read some scenarios, right? And these people are gonna say, it's a go, I don't know, it's a no. Because oftentimes the gray area is a space we don't talk about. Mm-hmm. All right, so here we go. Taquanda and Terrence met on a Tinder date. She was pleased with the conversation and decided to have sex with him that night. In the morning, Taquanda woke up before her partner and decided she wanted to give him a blowjob while he was sleeping. Is that consensual or not? Oh.
Listen, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna wake you up anyway. I wanna suck that dick.
For sure. It's okay. Y'all can do whatever y'all wanna do to us, really. It's okay. That's the double standard.
So I said this to the back. If I already sucked your dick, I'm gonna suck it within 24 hours. Like, bro, let me suck it. Like, okay.
Look, I see a man in the audience like thumbs down.
Okay. How about
not consensual?
So,
all right.
If I don't want the dick in the morning,
tell me what you're feeling.
You leave it.
Nope. It's not consensual. And that's the double standard when it comes to men and women.
Oh,
the thing is that when you're a man, it's assumed that you're the aggressor, that you take initiative. Nope. But when you're the woman, you're the submissive. So now what happens is that when women take a dominant position, because they're women and we're men, we're supposed to accept it. But if I don't get a yes, it's a no, right? So if you don't get a yes, it's a no.
I like this guy.
You want to wake up and suck my dick, and you to get a yes, it's a no. So no. If you doing it in a way that the thing is, though, is the discussion has to be had between the two people about what can and can't go down.
Thank you.
But let me be real. These three plus me, we're nasty. You seem very middle of the road.
I'm pretty vanilla.
Probably vanilla. Do you have conversations with your partner prior to actual intercourse?
No. Very rare.
See, she's cool.
Very rare.
Oh, she's cool. Right. She's just going to let you take advantage of her. So my question to you is, why do you think we don't do that?
I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I guess it's it's realistic. It's the society that we're in, and it's like what we're used to, and it's kind of normal just to have sex without having a big discussion about it. I'm not saying that's right.
No, but I would like to talk to you, Isabel. I would like to talk to you about what I've been thinking about.
We're gonna corner you we're gonna find you backstage, girl.
You're gonna smash her.
She looks so conservative, right? Like she is like she got straight A's in school, right?
Couple things I've learned. Firstly, that I have incredibly boring sex. Secondly, that even with this incredibly progressive audience, that still there does seem to be genuine confusion around the topic of consent. And so it's obviously a massive gray area.
It's hard for people to accept. It's hard for people to say, oh shit, maybe I did that wrong. And I think what adds to that is that we live in a sensationalized media world that wants to drag people. As soon as they try to apologize or say, oh shit, I realize I did it wrong. I sometimes become frustrated with how the Me Too movement has moved so far away from what it started as. An opportunity for us to call attention to youth of color in disenfranchised communities that experienced physical assault. And now it's like, is Aziza Zarian really guilty? And then I'm reminded, are you compromising that survivor's experience? Because trauma is experienced by every single person differently. Like what you might identify as trauma, I might be like, girl, that's Tuesday.
So what do you think is the truth in the Aziz Ansari case?
I think there's a lot of truths, but I think the overall truth is that our society has groomed both men and women not to communicate appropriately about sex.
In the 1970s and 80s, the campaign Take Back the Night emerged on college campuses, laying out the unambiguous message that no means no when it comes to sexual encounters. But the problem with that is that anything apart from no could by default mean yes, which is why many universities across the country are now instating affirmative consent policies where only a clear verbal yes actually means yes.
What do you feel about affirmative consent? You know, needing to have a yes, a solid yes, before you move ahead with anything?
Make your dick get soft.
If your dick can't withstand a simple question, then it should wilt, like the shitty flower that it is.
If you're asking at every step during a sexual experience, do I have your permission to kiss you? Do I have your permission to take off your underwear? That's definitely gonna kill the vibe.
You gotta flow into the moment, man. You ain't out here just like, oh, can I touch your titty? Can I touch your pussy? Like, ain't nobody got time for that shit.
I think it would be better to be awkward than to be in the wrong.
You gotta read those signs, I guess. And that's what's hard for me is reading those signs.
We're at Northeastern University in Boston, about to go and meet Dr. Lisa Barrett, who is a neuroscientist who can help us understand how the way that our brains work actually create confusion around consent.
This study was designed to figure out when we influence your physical state in a particular way, how does that change the way that you see other people?
Okay.
All right.
Anything feel like it's tugging or pulling?
No, it feels completely normal.
All right, great.
This test attempts to measure the theory that our mood influences what we see. If we feel good, then we tend to judge others more positively. I was asked to rate neutral faces on likability, reliability, and trustworthiness. But unknown to my conscious mind, flashing images of scowling or smiling faces were shown split seconds before to influence my answers, which were then recorded along with my heart rate and perspiration.
Looking at your skin conductance, there are specific peaks a couple of seconds after you were faced with probably a scowling face would be my guess.
Really?
Yeah. It was a change in your gut feelings. Basically, when you're in a pleasant state, you think someone with a neutral face is more trustworthy, and when you're in an unpleasant state, you think the person is less trustworthy. These are beautiful results from a scientific standpoint. From
my standpoint, not so great.
Well, what I always tell people is, as a scientist, I love results like this. As a human person, I find them horrifying, actually.
Yeah, that's terrifying. How does us guessing or misreading people, how does that play out in a sexual encounter?
If your desire is to have sex with someone, you are more likely to interpret, to perceive actions as signaling intent.
Isn't it dangerous to excuse bad behavior because we're saying that this is just the way that our brains work?
I want to be really clear. I'm not talking about sexual harassment or rape. We're talking about misunderstandings that happen between two adults who are capable of giving their consent. To say that one person could believe that they had been given consent and another person believes that they really never gave it. And it really is possible for both of those things to be true, even when everybody has the best intentions.
So is the solution to have constant verbal consent?
It could be the difference between a really great experience and a really horrible experience.
Communication is key. But how do we handle the countless situations where miscommunication has caused harm?
I am living with my traumas every single day and every single moment. I cannot imagine for a second that any of the people that have hurt me struggle with that or deal with that or move through the world any differently because of that.
If there was a way for them to apologize to the people, directly to the people that they hurt.
Would I feel more calm about it? Would I feel healed by having that done? I don't know. But I think for some people, absolutely.
I would like to sit down with the person who hurt me and have that conversation. If I had the opportunity to do so, I would take it.
If I think about reaching out to the people that I've personally been in these situations with, it's just incredibly awkward and uncomfortable conversations to have. So I'm really curious to know how people are actually able to instigate these conversations and what they look like in reality. We met a woman named Alexis and a man we've agreed to call James. They're embracing a simple yet radical idea, talking out their sexual encounter face to face.
So about 10 years ago, James and Alexis were at college together and they wound up having sex. That is an event that James put down to being a drunken encounter that both of them were responsible for. And that is what he's believed for the last 9.5 years or so, and which Alexis puts down to being rape.
As we get into this, I'd like to remind you about what restorative justice is.
Leading that conversation, Professor Alyssa Ackerman, an advocate for a method called restorative justice.
Alexis reached out to me about 9 months ago, asking for somebody to facilitate a restorative justice process for her.
What is restorative justice?
So restorative justice focuses on the harm that is caused, not a particular statute violation. These types of cases involve everyday people who really don't understand the depths of the harm that they've caused.
By going through this restorative justice, allowing perpetrators to have a voice in all this, are we not excusing them?
So I actually think that this holds them more accountable than the criminal justice process does. The fact of the matter is that for every 1,000 rapes committed in this country, only 6 people will go to prison. This offers an opportunity for survivors to get what they actually say that they need, which is a voice, some validation, and the ability to tell their story in a place that they're safe.
Alexis reached out to Alyssa for help nearly a year ago. At James's request, we've agreed to obscure both of their faces. You were the one that initiated this restorative justice process. Why and how did you go about doing that?
Yeah, I think it was just a last-ditch effort. Like, I'd done every kind of therapy and thought every kind of thought, and it still just wasn't doing it. And I don't know, it was just like, fuck it. And he had like the missing piece of this puzzle, and that was just what I needed, you know, to not have it hurt the same way.
Do you have that email that you first sent to him?
I do, yeah. So I wrote, I wonder if you're forced to think about it every day like I am. I wonder if you know how it feels trying to stop crying on the way to work when Weinstein and Ailes and Brock Turner just keep winning. I wonder if you know about the years of therapy and a decade of panic attacks, or when the doctors told me I'd probably be managing the PTSD for the rest of my life. I wonder if you know what it feels like when your body takes over, when it contorts into panic and you lose control of your breath, but your brain can't override the system. I never get to forget, because even when I do, my body remembers. I wonder if you know what happened back then, that I dropped out of school, that I fled from everything I knew, that I had now come to distrust, and that finally I attempted suicide. But probably the worst part of all of it is that I wonder if you know that it's in your power to put a stop to this for me. It's always been in your power. You could still say you're sorry today. You could fix this at any moment. We could sit down and figure out how to heal together. I can never change what happened, but you can start to repair the damage any day you want.
On the receiving side of that email, James, who at one time considered Alexis one of his best friends, he asked us to alter his real voice. Alexis reached out to you a few months ago. How did you feel when you received that email?
It completely stopped me in my tracks. I was walking down the street and I stood there and read it over and over again. Her being so honest really brought me to the table and made me realize that I need to deal with this. This is, I owe it to this person. My friends and family cautioned me against speaking with Alexis or being honest with her or even communicating with her. But I care a lot about this process and I care a lot about Alexis, so ultimately, that's why I'm here.
I think in terms of basic details, I remember that we'd been drinking a lot, and someone, I can't remember exactly who or how they were brought there, but we had pot brownies. I remember, you went to your room, I went to my room, but I was so passed out at this point. And I just remember these flashes of a face above me, but it didn't make sense. And then there was like little things like, I remember finding underwear in my room, and I told myself it was a dream and that the things I thought I had seen and imagined just couldn't be real. Like really not wanting to face the next level of this line of questioning.
There's a lot that I don't remember, how I got into your room, why I came into your room, when it happened, any of those details. The first memories I have are of me being on top of you in your bed. And that experience, I was able to normalize it because I just want to be careful with the words I use, but you were active in the process in the sense that you weren't unconscious. And so for that image and that memory of that portion of it was what allowed me to call it sex for 9 years. When it had been established kind of through our friends that you felt this was rape and that I had felt this was a drunken sexual experience. And I wasn't ready to have that conversation with myself. I was a good person. How could I possibly do that to you, to one of my best friends? And that opinion was validated by, friends of mine.
It became the default was to believe you. And I became this source of problem in our community, this source of like a incongruity. No one could imagine you. I didn't want to see you like this. No one could imagine you like this. And it was easier to dismiss it. And so by default, everyone believed you and you didn't have to do anything or change anything and you got to keep everything the way it was. And I had to leave everything and leave everybody.
One of my biggest regrets throughout all of this is, in addition to, hurting you that night and causing that trauma, I had 10 years of opportunities to right that. And I discarded you in this process, and
It was up shot of 3 people sitting in a room.
Thank you for saying that.
This whole interaction is pretty incredible to watch. I mean, it's so raw and emotional and brutally honest and human. I mean, these guys are just sitting, having a very simple conversation, and it's an incredibly difficult conversation to have. And yet there's so much humanity and somehow understanding and forgiveness here.
I realized that we haven't called it what it is. Maybe we should be calling it what it is. I wonder if you can do that.
For the longest time, I didn't see it as how I see it now. And, I mean, to answer your question, yeah, it was rape. That's not easy to say, both because I know what it's done to you, and I know there's a flash of fear every time I associate with it.
At that point in time, there was just two words for this. There was just victim and rapist, and I don't think either of us wanted to be either of those things. I didn't think you were a bad person. I thought you had done a bad thing.
And Alexis, for you, the decision to do this was an easy one. But when you were asked to do it in shadow, that was very, very hard for you.
Yeah, it was really difficult. If my healing process is one of embodying even the worst things that have happened to me and embodying who I have become since then and what I have become, this was like a step in the opposite direction. But we're not really moving the needle at all until men start doing it. And your words have the potential to reach any other man and show that there's a path to taking responsibility. This feels better to appreciate the fact that we all have the capacity to harm, and we all have the capacity to be harmed.
Restorative justice isn't a solution for everyone. For some, confronting an assailant does not equal justice. For others, admitting to actions that could have real criminal consequences is out of the question. But at least for Alexis and James, it is providing the beginning of a way forward. And as disturbing and transformative as the last year of frenzied media coverage has been, what so many of us want is an opportunity to redefine our culture. Even if we can't change the past, maybe then we won't have to repeat it.
Credits roll on the screen. Executive producer Bill Maher, consent, producer Jackie, editor Andrew Patterson, additional producer. Credits continue. Sorry, they're moving too fast for me to describe each one. Last screen. There's Duck.
Thank you so much. Thank you for playing the movie, Arjita. I probably, and I want to take full responsibility. I'm really sorry. We should have given a trigger warning around experiences of abuse and assault. And I've seen some people have left the call also in case others find at any point things are disturbing. You can decide to leave the call and come back in about 15 minutes for the discussion even now. So just wanted to share that. In case this has triggered something and you'd like some help, we can connect you to counselors. So just wanted to share that and take responsibility for not having shared that before. And apologies for it. Can I please request Arjita to continue the screening with the 4 short films out of the 11 short film series by PLD, an organization, an Indian organization. Like I mentioned before, the screenings are in Hindi, the subtitles are in English. And so we've tried to sort of balance that language and visual barrier that way. If anybody needs extra support, I can just pause for 10 seconds. Please let us know right now. Or we could just start the screenings when Arjita's ready.
I'm just starting.
Sure. Okay. Another 4 short films by PLD on consent and touching on different areas of consent.
Unboxing Consent, based on real stories. as documented by Partners for Law in Development. Lab in front of a camera
लैब काफ़ी बिजी रहता है, तो काफ़ी पेशेंट्स आते जाते रहते हैं. हम लोगों को इतना टाइम ही नहीं मिलता कि बात कर सके या थोड़ा रिलैक्स कर लें. अलाउ भी नहीं करते हैं, तो हम लोग छत पे चले जाते हैं थोड़ा फ्रेश एयर के लिए. वहीं पे हम लोगों की बातें शुरू हो गई. वो मुझे काफ़ी फ़नी लगा. हर टाइम जोक्स मारता रहता था, सबका मजाक उड़ाता रहता था. अब हमारा काम थोड़ा सा बोरिंग हो जाता है, तो हंसी मजाक अच्छा लगा थोड़ा सा. मतलब मैं लैब में कहीं पे भी होती थी तो वो वही आके मुझे ढूंढ लेता था. काम के बाद भी हमारी मैसेजेस पे बातें होनी शुरू हो गई. फिर आदत सी पड़ गई. वो मुझे 11 बजे के टाइम पे मैसेज करता था और फिर हम 1-2 बजे तक चैट करते रहते थे. कई बार ऐसा होता था कि हम पूरी रात बात करते रहे और 1-2 बारी तो मैं फ़ोन पे ही सो गई बात करते हुए.
क्या आपको लगने लगा that he likes you?
शायद मतलब फेसबुक पे जब भी मैं कुछ पोस्ट करती थी तो सबके सामने सबसे पहले वही कमेंट करता था, लाइक करता था, तो थोड़ा सा ऑब्वियस हो गया था. और फिर बाद में मैं जब छूटते उसके मैसेजेस का जवाब नहीं देती थी तो फिर वो इरिटेट हो जाता था. पिछले महीने मेरे कुछ कॉलीग्स ने पूछा कि तूने हमें अपने बॉयफ्रेंड के बारे में नहीं बताया. तो मैंने कहा भाई मुझे ही नहीं पता कि मेरा बॉयफ्रेंड कौन है, तो मैं कैसे बताऊं. तब मुझे पता चला कि इसने कुछ लोगों को बोल दिया है कि हम दोनों साथ में हैं और अपना फेसबुक स्टेटस भी चेंज कर दिया है इन अ रिलेशनशिप.
फिर क्या किया आपने?
मैं सीधा उसके पास चली गई. मेरा दिमाग इतना घूम गया था कि मुझसे वेट ही नहीं हुआ और उसको ये समझ ही नहीं आ रहा था कि मुझे इतना गुस्सा क्यों आ रहा है. मुझसे कहता कि तू मुझे इतने मैसेजेस करती है, मेरे साथ इतना टाइम स्पेंड करती है, सारा टाइम बातें करने में, मेरे जोक्स पे हंसती है. भाई वो सब तो व्हाट्सएप था ना. तूने ऐसे कैसे सोच लिया कि मैं तेरी गर्लफ्रेंड हूँ? मैंने अपने दिमाग से कैसे सोच लिया? मैंने कभी तुझे बोला कि आई लव यू, आई वॉन्ट टू बी विथ यू?
क्या आपको लगता है क्योंकि आप उनसे रात को देर बात करते थे और पर्सनल बातें शेयर करते थे, उनको लगने लगा कि आप दोनों के बीच में कुछ है?
हाँ शायद. मतलब कुछ बातें कही थी मैंने उससे चैट पे रात को. हो जाता है, लेकिन सब कुछ अपने दिमाग में पका के बैठने से पहले और पब्लिकली सबको बताने से पहले एक बार उसको मुझसे पूछ लेना चाहिए था ना कि मैं क्या सोचती हूँ. और वैसे भी मैंने उससे ऐसे कोई पर्सनल इतनी भी ज़्यादा बातें नहीं शेयर करी थी.
Screen closes and with hashtag did you ask and hashtag in a working environment friendship is welcome but intimacy demands consent. Not respecting consent is workplace misconduct, amounts to sexual harassment and is punishable by law. PLD, Advancing Social Justice and Women's Rights in the Law. PLD series in association with promotion.
Arjita, can you stop for a second?
Somebody is...
Can I please request someone's request the admin controls to unmute to mute this person? Can I please request? Excuse me. Hello. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you so much, Arjita. I just want to also request Arjita at the end of the film, when everything is text on screen, can you just reduce the volume a little bit so that Shrunati is a little more audible in the beginning when the title flows and the end when the question flows. Thank you.
Nidhi, hi, Praveen here. Just one request.
Yes, Praveen.
If she can pause the video when she is doing the description, because we can't hear what she's trying to say.
So Praveen, thank you. That's why I'm just asking Arjita to reduce the volume entirely. Then Srinidhi will be audible. Because it's only on music and it's text in these films. In the other films, the visuals and audio was overlapping even from their end, and they had a lot of visuals while they were speaking and the voiceovers was on. So the previous film was harder. All of these short films follow the same guidelines of, like, in the beginning they have music while text is on screen, and towards the end they have music while text is on screen. So I'll take note of that, and thank you so much for flagging, and really apologies for the first one.
Excuse me, can you please translate it, because some of us could not understand. So
Okay.
can you just give the gist?
Of course, sure. Thank you for flagging that.
I can do that. I was typing privately to the person who had requested it. I could paste or I could repaste that in the group itself. I just sent it privately to the person who wanted the translation, so I can send it to you as well.
So can I request you, Srinidhi, that you can send it to all participants, and I'll say it in English while Srinidhi is sending that sort of transcribed. So this is an audio of a girl, a woman. She basically was talking about her workplace, that they don't find. They don't get too much of time to interact, etc. But they used to get some breaks where she and this particular man, because she attributes to him as him, they got to know each other. They used to meet on the terrace of their hospital, I'm assuming, because she said medicine. And they also then started chatting at about 11 p.m. at night. And she said sometimes we would chat so much that I would fall asleep on the phone. There was some sort of conversations going on, and their friends thought that they were dating. Also, if she wouldn't reply, he started getting really agitated if she wouldn't reply something. And what then started happening is that he went on to tell everybody that they were dating without asking her out or without seeking consent. And she did not know about it. Suddenly her friends told her colleagues told her that he's saying he's dating you, and he changed his relationship status on Facebook, on social media. And so she says that, we used to talk and I told him some personal things about me, but it's not like and they should have at least he should have at least asked before sharing all of this. And there are some more requests for audio description to be loud. We've noted that, and from this film we will follow this pattern, that the music will be soft while audio description is going on, and at the end I'll just give a 30 seconds or a minute long translated gist. I hope that's okay. Arjita, can I request, please?
Yeah, I'm resuming now.
This is a YouTube screen. She's just putting it on full screen. The title of the video is Handling Rejection by Pooja. Handling rejection based on real stories as documented by Partners for Law in Development. Pooja is a student. She's sitting in front of a camera.
दिन में तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होती थी, वो रात को थोड़ी दिक्कत होती थी क्योंकि मेरे पीजी के टाइमिंग होते थे, 8 बजे तक वापस आना होता था। तो एक दिन उसने बोला कि वो बालकनी से चढ़ के अंदर आ जाएगा। हफ्ते में 1-2 बार हम ऐसे मिल लेते थे रात को। पीजी मैम ने उसको चढ़ते हुए देख लिया और मैंने उनको बोला कि ऐसा पहले कभी नहीं हुआ है, मतलब, लेकिन उन्होंने उसी टाइम मेरे मम्मी पापा को फोन कर दिया।
फिर आपने उनको मनाया कैसे?
मैंने बोला मैं उससे कभी नहीं मिलूंगी, मतलब मैंने बहुत मिन्नतें करी हैं, उसके बाद जाके वो थोड़ा शांत हुए और मुझे वापस भेजा है और मम्मी साथ में आ गई। फिर भी मतलब 2-3 मिनट ही बात हो पाती थी, वो भी छुप छुप के। तो एक दिन मैं मिली और मैंने बोला देखो ये बहुत मुश्किल है, क्योंकि अगर मेरे मम्मी पापा को हल्का सा भी शक हो गया कि मैं तुमसे मिल रही हूँ तो वो मुझे कॉलेज से बाहर निकाल देंगे, मतलब 2 बार सोचेंगे भी नहीं। फिर भी नहीं समझ पा रहा था कि मेरी क्या सिचुएशन है। रात भर मैसेज करता रहता था और मतलब किसी और लड़के से बात करते हुए देख लिए तो बोलता था अच्छा तुम मुझसे बात कर सकती हो लेकिन मेरे से नहीं कर सकती। कभी कभी तो पीजी के बाहर खड़ा रहता था पूरी रात। मेरी मम्मी इधर थी तब भी पूरी रात पीजी के बाहर खड़ा था। वो व्हाट्सएप पे ऐसे मैसेजेस भेजने लग गया कि मैं अपनी जान ले लूँगा। तो शुरू में मुझे लगा कि अभी ब्रेकअप हुआ है तो मतलब थोड़ा टाइम लगता है, लेकिन उसके 2-3 दिन बाद उसने एक फ़ोटो भेजा। उसने अपना हाथ काट लिया था। तो मैंने उसके दोस्तों को फ़ोन किया कि जाके चेक करें, मतलब इससे पहले कि बात और बिगड़ जाए। उसने अपने 3rd ईयर के पेपर नहीं दिए, घर चला गया।
Must you harm? Rejection hurts. Acknowledging it is the first step towards healing and moving on. Acts of revenge are shaming and are harmful to you and others. They may also be punishable under law. This is translated again in Hindi. Using official position to cause disadvantage in present or future employment to a colleague, co-worker because of their rejection of sexual advances amounts to sexual harassment at the workplace under law. Stalking on social media or in person, bullying, making threats of violence or actual violence to yourself or others, or circulating intimate photographs of someone without their permission are offenses punishable by law. This is translated into Hindi. PLD, Advancing Social Justice and Women's Rights Through the Law, Mekata Foundation for Financial Support. A PLD series in association with Commotion.
Okay. This is so Shri is sending the transcript. Sorry, Shri, since you've transcribed the whole thing, do you want to read what you've transcribed?
Yeah, sure. So this is a story of a woman who was living, a girl student who was living in a PG, and she had a visitor who would come to see her. They are in a relationship, it seems. He used to once he climbed the building balcony and entered the PG, but it used to happen once in a while. But her PG madam saw it and reported it to her parents, because of which she had to break up the relationship, and she was only able to communicate with him secretly. Her parents, she was afraid that her parents would take her out of college. He would message her at night, and he complained a lot because she was not replying to his messages. And he started sending messages of threatening to kill himself. And a few days later, he sent a photo of his hands cut. She thought that it was just because of the breakup, it would be very hard. She didn't think that he would go through the process of harming himself. She asked a few friends to go visit and check on him. He didn't even finish his final paper. Yes, the videos are all available on YouTube. Ashita, can you go to the next one? This video is unboxing consent based on real stories, as documented by Partners for Law and Development. Niranjini, a professor.
बाकी प्रोफेसर्स जो सीनियर थे वो इतना घुलते मिलते नहीं थे, अपने आप में ही रहते थे, बट ही वाज स्लाइटली डिफरेंट, मोर फ्रेंडली एंड ओपन, और हमारे इंटरेस्ट भी काफ़ी मिलते थे. हम दोनों को पोएट्री लिखने का शौक़ था और बुक्स एक्सचेंज करते थे, तो ऐसे ही बस दोस्ती हो गई थी. मुझे कैंपस रेसिडेंस में शिफ्ट करना पड़ा क्योंकि मेरे हस्बैंड चले गए थे यूएस अपनी पीएचडी कंप्लीट करने, और उससे हमारे प्रॉब्लम्स और बढ़ गए. डिस्टेंस मेड थिंग्स वर्स. तो आप अपने मैरिज इश्यूज उनके साथ शेयर करते थे? हाँ, मतलब वी वर फ्रेंड्स. काफ़ी चीज़ों का एडवाइस लेती थी मैं उनसे. एक बार तो जॉब भी छोड़ने का सोच रही थी एंड ही एडवाइस अगेंस्ट इट एंड आई एग्रीड विथ हिम. और वैसे भी काफ़ी सपोर्ट करते थे. मतलब जब मैं शिफ्ट करके आई थी तो कभी खाना ले आते थे, और कैंपस में कोई भी शो होता था या कहीं अड्डेबाजी होती थी तो अक्सर हम साथ जाते थे. विंटर वाज वेरी टफ क्योंकि हमारे मैरिज प्रॉब्लम्स बढ़ती जा रही थी और मैं बहुत स्ट्रेस्ड रहने लगी थी. एक बार उन्हीं के यहाँ डिनर था और जब सब चले गए मैंने सोचा कि थोड़ी देर और रुकूं. सिर्फ बात करना चाह रही थी मैं उनसे, और बात करते करते वो मेरे बाल सहलाने लगे. मैंने नोटिस ही नहीं किया. आई केप्ट टॉकिंग, पर सडनली उनके हाथ इधर उधर जाने लगे और मुझे समझ ही नहीं आया कि क्या कहूँ, और मैं वहाँ से चली गई. उसके बाद कॉलेज में मैं बहुत ऑकवर्ड फील कर रही थी. मैंने उनको अवॉइड करना शुरू कर दिया. स्टाफ रूम नहीं जाती थी और पर फिर मैंने सोचा कि वे मैच्योर अडल्ट्स, हम बैठ के भी तो बात कर सकते हैं, कोई मिसअंडरस्टैंडिंग हो तो क्लियर करनी चाहिए. तो ही केम ओवर, बट देन ही डिड द सेम थिंग अगेन. मैंने कहा कि मैं शादीशुदा हूँ, तो उन्होंने कहा कि उन्हें नहीं फ़र्क पड़ता और वैसे भी ये हमारे बीच की बात है, तो उसमें कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होनी चाहिए. That really upset me a lot. I couldn't deal with that.
तो आपको लगा कि आपको यूनिवर्सिटी छोड़नी पड़ेगी इसकी वजह से?
हाँ, मतलब I was enjoying myself at the university. मेरा फ्यूचर काफ़ी ब्राइट लग रहा था मुझे, पर it was just very uncomfortable. I couldn't do it.
Hashtag did you ask? In a working environment, friendship is welcome, but intimacy demands consent. The same lines are translated. Not respecting consent is workplace misconduct, amounts to sexual harassment, and is punishable by law. PLD, Advancing Social Justice and Women's Rights Through the Law, Nepal Foundation for Financial Support. The PLD logo is a tree. A PLD series in association with Comotion. This is the last video that we are watching from this series. This video is titled Handling Rejection, Kabir. Handling Rejection, based on real stories, as documented by Partners for Law and Development. Kabir is a project manager and sits in a chair in front of a camera.
फोटोज ले रहे हैं?
हाँ, मैं छुप के खिलूंगा. She was there, she saw. Actually उस रात हम दोनों ने ही ज़्यादा पी ली थी. कंपनी ऑफ साइड था, हाई इंटेंसिटी, पर ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं है कि मुझे पता नहीं चला कि मैं क्या कर रहा हूँ.
And what about her?
She was fine. हाँ, मैंने उसको पहले किस किया, बट उसने मुझे मना नहीं किया, रोका नहीं. She was kissing back.
फिर अगले दिन क्या हुआ?
अगले दिन I was feeling good, but she was a bit off, I think. उसको लगा कि कुछ गलत हुआ है. Maybe because she was already in a relationship. मुझे पता था कि उसका बॉयफ्रेंड है, बट मुझे लगा कुछ सीरियस नहीं है. एंड look, honestly, उस रात के बाद मैं कुछ एक्सपेक्ट तो कर रहा था. So I guess I wasn't really listening to her side.
And what was her side?
She told him what happened. उसको सिर्फ सब कुछ वापस सॉर्ट आउट करना था. For her it was a mistake. And then she wants space.
तो फिर आपने ये सब अपने कॉलीग्स के साथ क्यों डिस्कस किया?
Guess मेरा दिमाग खराब हो गया था यार. मतलब और उस टाइम पे एकदम दिमाग में नहीं आया that like I'm going the wrong way, I'm breaking her trust like that. मुझे सिर्फ अपनी फ्रस्ट्रेशन निकालनी थी.
तभी आपने फोटोज भी दिखाई सबको?
मैंने एक दो को भेजी थी, बट मुझे बिल्कुल नहीं पता चला कि स्प्रेड लाइक दैट.
क्या उसके बाद आपकी बात हुई है उनसे?
नो, क्योंकि उस टाइम पे मेरे को लगा कि मेरे साथ गलत हुआ है, तो जो भी कुछ था खत्म हो गया. एंड कुछ महीने बाद मैंने जॉब स्विच कर लिया था.
इस वजह से?
Hashtag must you harm. बदला क्यों? Rejection hurts. Acknowledging it is the first step towards healing and moving on. Acts of revenge and shaming are harmful to you and others. They may also be punishable under law. The same text is translated into Hindi. Using official position to cause disadvantage in present or future employment to a colleague/co-worker because of their rejection of sexual advance amounts to sexual harassment in workplace under law. Stalking on social media or in person, bullying, making threats of violence or actual violence to yourself or others, or circulating intimate photographs of someone without their permission or offense is punishable by law. The same text is translated into Hindi. There's a PLD logo, which is a tree. Below it, it says, Advancing Social Justice and Women's Rights Through the Law, MacArthur Foundation for Financial Support. A PLD series in association with
Sorry, do we have someone who's okay? We're at the end of the screening, Sarjita?
Yeah, we're done.
Yes, we're done.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Shindy, and thanks, Arjita, for coordinating this. I just want to take a moment to pause and let all the different case studies, etc., the different pieces that we engaged with in the last 40-45 minutes to sink in, and to discuss this and take some of the discussions forward. What we're going to do now is just in 30 seconds invite both our speakers.
Hold on, Nithi, hi Nithi, this is Jagdish. Nithi, the second movie somehow, I think I could not hear the audio. If that's the case with everybody, then maybe can we play that again? Was it only me who missed it, or is it everybody? The second Hindi movie.
Second short film?
Yeah.
Jagdish, I could hear it fairly clearly.
Okay. So maybe there was, that's fine then.
Yeah. But we can also give you a gist again while
the transcription is in the box.
Yeah, if you go in the chat box, Jagdish, there'll be a translation. It was more about handling rejection and some of the pertinent questions. Some of the experiences shared were when she rejects the man, he sends her photos of his cut wrist and tells her that he would commit suicide. So rejection and harm was, rejection and harm were some of the discussions there. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And just thank you so much for flagging that. It just helps. And we have, we're just going to quickly move to our speakers, and it's very interesting because I interchanged their name for a very, very long time. We have Subha from Sri Lanka and Shubha from Nepal. Thank you for joining us, Subha and Shubha. For everybody who's present on the call, just some brief introduction. They're young feminists who've done tremendous amount of work in gender, sexuality, technology, etc. But just to give a brief introduction, Subha is a queer feminist activist, a writer, a blogger, a researcher, a very dear colleague, and of course working on gender, sexual rights, and digital rights. Currently working also with CREA, a feminist human rights organization. Shubha is from Nepal, a queer feminist from Nepal. She's the co-founder and executive director of Body and Data. And I know Shubha from the time she's working on sexuality and disability and technology as well. So thank you, Shubha, for joining us. Thank you, Subha, for joining us. I'd request both of you to unmute yourselves. I'd like just to request you to give some opening thoughts from your experience, work, and the films that we saw. So if I can, a couple of minutes, so let's say about the next 4 or 5 minutes, if each of you could take to just unpack some of the bits, and then I can point, I have specific questions to ask you, and we'll start inviting questions from the people on the call as well. Subha, could we please start with you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. I just want to start by saying thank you so much for having me, and hello everyone. It's really great to be here. I'll try and keep it brief, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what Shubha has to say as well. We love being in the same space, by the way, so we can confuse everyone. I really enjoyed the short films and the sort of little documentary that we watched at the beginning. I have, myself been quite fascinated with the Me Too movement, for example, since, it sort of took off on the social media version of it took off I think around 2018, October 2018 is when, it started taking off in its current iteration. Though, of course, as the documentary said, it's, something that was started much earlier in the mid-2000s by this African-American activist called Tarana Burke in the United States. But I've been very fascinated with it, and it was really interesting to see the short films just now as well, and think again on the issue. I think some really interesting things were said and explored briefly in the documentary that we watched first. And I think when we talk about consent, I think what has happened as a kind of result of the intensity of the Me Too moment and the Me Too conversation is that it's become a very polarizing and polarized conversation, and I don't think that has left us with a lot of room to have really empathetic conversations about, from a place of humanity, about the fact that actually, just like she said in that documentary, neither men nor women in this world are really socialized to communicate about sex. And, sexuality and sex is something that is highly taboo in many of our societies, remains highly taboo in many of our societies, right? I mean, even in the first world, like, I don't want to say that, in the global south, it's somehow a taboo. That's not true. We know that, at varying levels and in different ways, of course, but it is still something that is still surrounded by a lot of mystery. It's surrounded by a lot of stigma and shame sometimes, depending, again, where you are, what your context is, who you are, what your sexual orientation is, what your gender identity or expression might be, whether or not you have a disability. So all of those things kind of really shape the way in which we experience our own sexuality. And frankly, I just don't think that we have really built a world in which we can talk empathetically to each other about sex and what we like and what we don't like. And yeah, and I mean, I think I'll just leave it there for now, and I'd be, delighted to hear your questions, Nidhi. Thank you.
Thank you, Subha. I will come back to you with more questions and really going back to some very basic conversations and things that were raised in the film as well. But before that, can I please invite Shubha to share some opening remarks, and then we could take it forward.
Sure. Thank you, Nidhi, for including me in this conversation. And also thank you everyone for attending this movie screening and then the chat. I think the documentaries and the short films that we watch, I think I really like the fact that the short movies were from India. And, the mundane conversation that we have around consent and how it is presented as this blurry, hazy kind of thing in our context, it's actually really nicely portrayed. What I was also noticing in those short movies around how, those things as stalking and sharing photos, or getting wrong clues from people who are posed as people who are survivor victim in these kind of short movies. I mean, these things always happens, right? But also the component of digitalizing or using technology or media or phone. So that was coming across quite frequently. But watching these movies and documentary also made me think of the work that we have been doing in terms of, not just looking at people who are seen as vulnerable, like women, children, people with disability, and kind of having protectionist lens towards them, not just from state, but also from our families, of always policing what people do, but also how it restricts them from expressing and exploring themselves, especially their sexuality. So just wanted to highlight a couple of points in that. So in one of the work that we are doing now, we're talking to people with disabilities in Nepal, activists, as well as people outside the movement,
and how a lot of self-censorship happens just because they are activists and they think that they have to use media and technology or internet mostly for work and not for the sexuality, and how they are seen or not seen positively by other activists. So that is why a lot of controlling of sexual activities happens online by these activists. The other part that came up in the conversation that we were having is how among people with disabilities, it's very heteronormative, and other queer folks within the disability spectrum are not visible, and how, again, binary model is used by the movement itself. I'm talking on the basis of Nepal context, but I don't know if it's the same in India or elsewhere. And the third part is about how even when people were exploring their sexuality and want to enjoy internet for their sexual pleasure, like trying to access porn or taking nudes, that's not exactly accessible, like in terms of how to navigate sexting or how to watch porn, how to find porn that is more accessible for people with disability, people with hearing impairment or visual impairment. So yeah, I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shubha, for your opening remarks, and we will come back to some of the pieces more about digital security and the whole consent piece. Subha, just I also want to share with everyone that we're going to start taking questions now. So you could please type your questions in the chat box. Just taking the first round as the facilitator's privilege. So Subha, just wanted to ask you, and I'm quoting from the film that we saw, right? 3 statements. I mean, the whole film stood out for me, but also, I mean, of course, there's taboo around speaking about sexuality. Speaking about consent also in many communities is a taboo or a non-question, right? So it's not a question at all. Why would you talk about consent? We know between people know if it's consensual or not. And like I said, it gets more complicated with disabilities because we feel like some groups of people do not have the ability to consent or should not be asked for consent. But there were 3 very common statements because I think when the Me Too movement started, the biggest problem that everybody stated, quote unquote, and in their words, I'm saying problem, is that if you start taking consent, it kills the romance. I think that's really, I mean, it seems very basic, but I think that's an argument that many people are using till now. And based on that, then the argument continues to saying, oh, is the perpetrator really at fault? And I think just to unpack some of that for just again, conversations that repeat around these 2 ideas of, that it kills the romance, and is the perpetrator really at fault? And why should we believe this woman? So just some thoughts on that, if you could share.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I really heard that echoed a lot in that documentary as well, that, somehow that, we've gotten stuck with this idea that consent is boring, it kills the vibe, so on and so forth. But I think that's exactly the kind of paradigm shift that we are talking about, that we are demanding or that we want to see happen and that we want to make happen, right? Is that obviously within the conversation, within the world in which we're living now, sure, like consent seems like an added chore. It seems like an added kind of, thing that you have to do, and it kills the vibe and kills the romance and whatever. But I mean, I think we're talking about a paradigm shift to a world that, we're talking about maybe making a world in which we are encouraged to talk about sex and sexuality in an affirmative way from the time we're young, right? In which we're encouraged to think about the things that give us pleasure, not just the things that frighten us or the things that we would say no to, right? A world in which we are encouraged, even as children, to to kind of start thinking about what do I like, right? And I've said this before, but it's interesting that the entire conversation around consent in the way in which it's being had right now is about saying no, but actually consenting is a way of saying yes to something that you want, right? So I think certainly you can't have a meaningful, sexy conversation about consent in a world in which we are constantly taught to be frightened of sex. We're constantly taught to be frightened of sexuality. We are told that it's dangerous, that it is risky, that it is a pathway to some kind of danger and harm, ultimately, right? And that is particularly a burden that some of us carry over others, right? Certain parts of our community carry that burden of fear more than others. And just like Shubha was saying, this protectionist lens, it's not just about state policy, it's how we are taught to think about ourselves. It's how we are taught to relate to our own sexuality is through the lens of protection, right? I mean, if you think about the concept of virginity, you think about the concept of honor, all of these things. I mean, what is embedded in those ideas is this fact that it is something that we have to protect ourselves from. Sex is something we have to protect ourselves from, right? So I think certainly within that world, we are not going to be able to really have ways of asking and receiving consent that is sexy. But the point is, it can be, right? A process of asking and receiving consent can be incredibly exciting. It can be thrilling. It can be incredibly pleasurable. It can be incredibly sexy, because it means that the encounter that you're having is one in which both people are being seen for their humanity, right? For their whole humanity, as messy as it may be. So I think, I mean, that would be my thought about this whole idea that consent kills romance and whatever. I mean, I think what I'm saying is I think we need to radically shift the conversation about sex itself, and only then can we have a conversation about consent that is really meaningful.
Right. I think we just need to shift the conversations about relationships. And so referring to something that we spoke about last week, it was really that how many kinds of relationships that you can have, how many zones. It's not always just black and white, or it's not always socially sanctioned love or sexual encounter, as you call it. It's just, I really think one of the other quotes from the film was, one of the women there says, it's better to be, if you think conversation makes you uncomfortable, it's better to be uncomfortable than to be in the wrong. And I think that's another way of looking at it. If one, that consent is important. So there's no, just, it can be super exciting if we think, I think the norm has been for so long that you don't talk about it, that norm has become sexy. I think the idea is that the norm is exciting rather than, or the norm is the romance. I think this debunking the ideas of just what romance means and how there are how many ways to come together. And I'll come back to you with a couple of more questions, but I will go to Shubha to just unpack. Sorry. There's someone who's typing, so I just paused because my voiceover starts speaking. Shubha, but I want to come to you because you mentioned the short films were exciting. I just feel like we live in this digital age. We are connected online, so there's no question of starting with, like, we live in the digital age. We all do. A lot of our romance, a lot of our encounters, a lot of friendships, a lot of intimacies, let me put it that way, within friendships, within romance, within collegial relationships, within whatever, happens online, right? It happens through social media, it happens through WhatsApp, through all these chat engines. I just, if you watch more of the PLD videos, this issue is raised even more through more and more case studies about sort of circulating just messages without consent, circulating images without consent. What is your take on that? Because there's a lot of, and I'm trying to really come down to the public opinion and trying to sort of unpack some of the popular beliefs that,
okay, but we are dating, we shared photos, and I wanted to share, or they said they love me and I wanted to share that with like X people, so I just did. So this fluid, like I'm not sure if it is fluidity, how do you want to term it? How does that move into the zone of violence? Does it move into the zone of violence and abuse? What does that look like? What does consent look like in this digital space?
Thank you for the question. I think one is definitely taking things around us for granted, right? Just to add on to what Shubha was saying earlier, either it be digital or, in physical space in real life, of how we see, let's say, for example, in a heteronormative marital relationship, how a man would expect his wife to do certain things for him, and how that is passed on to other people, even in relationship like partnership or living together, and how that expectation is built on even without actually being discussed openly. So I would bring it down to not having, like, our culture, I guess, or not just cultural specific, but the people, and then how we communicate with each other, and not being able to talk about our emotions and feelings, and not having language to it, is one of the issue, definitely. And like, again, going back to all the videos, like we were seeing mostly like women or marginalized group who are being victimized. So who is again at the bottom, like who gets victimized? The other thing is also, this whole framing of asking for consent is like, it's portraying it as if it's additional work to do, instead of making it part of the whole exercise. So when we frame it as something extra work to do, people are like, okay, then it becomes unsexy, or it's not cool or fun. So how do we also change the whole framing of language around like, hey, first ask, but instead saying like, okay, this is the basic thing that you should be doing. And I think it's not just for sex, right? It's also not within sexual partner, or not just only sex, but also among friends. So other people, like, let's say if I am not feeling well, if I'm too message needy, saying like, hey, I'm not feeling well, can I speak to you? Do you have mental space? Do you have energy to listen to me? Because it's going to be quite heavy. So also those kind of conversation, asking people if they can hold space for us. I think that would be something really, I started practicing that because I also was not really cautious of how to reach out and who to reach out and in what way. The other thing, whenever it comes to digital sphere and exploring and talking about a sexuality, I attended this workshop, like a short workshop on talking about sex and sexual desire. And what the facilitator made us do was to actually write down 3 things around sex and sexual pleasure that is a big yes to me, and 3 things that is a big no to me. For example, it could be, related to kink or other kind of sexual fantasy, or also about like talking, could be about like, how do you say kissing? It could be like kissing or smooch or like something else. How do I call my vagina? Is it vagina or coochie or something else? So also having that layout in front of us made it very easier for people in the room to communicate with each other about pleasure. So I think having those kind of boundaries set, either it be in friendship or it be in romantic or sexual relationship, or even just like, sexting relationship, because we also do sext and have romantic and sexual relationship with people outside our partners, let's say. So yeah, I think more like bringing those um, ways, or how do we communicate with people, I think that is something we can do from wherever we are, even at individual level. Thanks. I don't know if I answer your question.
I just wanted to understand a little more on how do we have, and either of you could respond to, is it even like, the framing of that post a breakup, or have holding intimate information of someone, and then sharing it out. How's that framed? Like, is it a violation of consent? And what are the ways either to secure ourselves? What could be some of the, I wanted to also move a little bit in that direction, and then I'll also respond to some of the disability specific comments and suggestions that are made in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, can I also just add something to what? Hello?
Yes, Subha, please go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of it sort of takes us into the point that you just raised, Nidhi. I just wanted to add something to what Shubha was saying just before as well. I mean, I think again, the point is that I think it would be sort of less complicated to understand a violation of consent if we were to really reframe what we think sex is, right? And I think that's a big part of the problem here, is that we are still really stuck in many ways in a really old-fashioned heteronormative way of understanding what sex is. Like what is a sexual act, right? How do we define and understand what a sexual act is? And I really think that, you know, advocacy that has been done, even by feminist movements for a very long time, is also really partly responsible for this, because we have also engaged in advocacy that forces us again and again to look at a sexual act being, you know, a literal penile vaginal contact or penetration or things like this, right? And I think, again, it really does not allow for us to capture the huge range of processes that could be sexual, right? Which don't even have to have physical contact. So if we really reframe what we think a sexual act is and what we think sex is, and we kind of try to transcend this really old-fashioned hetero idea about what constitutes sex, I think we would have a much easier time understanding why the sharing of intimate photos without someone's consent is a violation of consent. Because we would understand that exchange of photos as part of the sexual act. We would understand it as part of that process in which two people were engaging in sex, right? We would understand any kind of non-physical online exchange to be sex. So then again, there wouldn't be like such a lot of confusion around, oh, was this a violation of someone's consent or not? The problem is, it's not just to do, again, it's not just to do with the fact that we don't understand consent. The problem is we don't really understand sex either, or we don't want to. So that kind of keeps us stuck in this place as well.
Thank you, Subha. I think one of the comments by a woman with a disability from Africa was very interesting, because she says that if we want to say there isn't any consent and we want to say no, you're shamed into it, or you're almost forced into it, because women with disabilities are assumed to not have sexual opportunities. And so the guise under which you're forced is that you should just accept this because you may not. You may not sort of have this sexual opportunity to experience sex or intimacy ever in your life. So just the whole idea of asexuality, undesirability kicks in so strongly that this becomes almost a way to perpetrate violence, almost a way to normalize violence, and to make it more acceptable. I think somebody has unmuted themselves. Do you have a particular question? Okay. Yeah, just on that, Srinidhi, can I also request you to read the couple of other comments that have come in? Yeah.
Sure. Somebody wants to ask a question, but okay, I'll read the others. Most of the people do not agree with our idea of consent. It is very hard to convince people, especially the police. Tripti Jain says, I'm Tripti, a feminist and researcher from Internet Democracy Project. We are reconceptualizing data as an extension of our body and what consent means in data governance. My question is to Shubha. Do you think that certain people with disabilities or from other marginalized communities cannot even give or deny consent because they come from that sphere in the light of lack of access? And then there's another person who says, Praveen, who says, it takes a long time for blind people to express sexual desires. Often there are many misunderstandings about the opposite sex. The societal attitude of blind people being sexual also adds to the deprivation.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Hello? Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
They muted themselves. The last point is also from Tripti, which says that just dropping a comment in digital world to prevent people from sharing others' information without consent, it is imperative for people to understand the importance of privacy and that consent is a non-negotiable.
Thank you, Shri, for reading all of those. I'm just going to start with one of the questions, and then I'll request Shubha and Subha to come in on the rest. I think I'm still going to also encourage both of them to talk about the disability specific questions if they'd like to. I think it was a question by Praveen. I think there is a very normalization to expression of desire. And I'll make the sort of ambience a little light, or the conversation a little light, and I'll share with people here that, you know, my colleague, who I'm not sure if I have the consent to name, basically told me that you really don't understand when somebody's flirting with you, right?
For sure, please do.
Okay, so I have consent. Srinidhi, basically, after one of my talks, she was like, oh my God, Nidhi, please, like, build some understanding. You have no perspective. You're not able to understand somebody's flirting with you. And I'm like, no. They were just networking with me. And I can really tell you, my confusion with flirtation and networking goes way back, way back. So, sorry, am I audible?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So basically, I went on thinking about why this is happening, because some folks have told me this earlier as well. Some others have told me this. And I was like, okay, wait. And I gave it a serious thought because Srinidhi told it to me and she gave that feedback. And I was like, okay, wait. And then I came back and I said, because people have almost made a kind of like, to approach someone, we have a very typical way of approaching someone. Because I don't know if because Bollywood taught us, because it's a natural inkling, because that's how we see romance happening or desires being expressed. It's like through eye contact, right? That's the first point that's been told. And so for me, I was like, if somebody wants to flirt with me, they'll find a better way. They'll find an accessible way. I may not get it because I'm blind, but which means they don't know me well enough. Or they're not trying hard enough, or they're really sticking to the very quote unquote normal ways of expressing desire. So I'm just trying to say that for all of us, I think expression of desire gets complicated with disability. It does even more, because even if you're hitting on a person, or if you're expressing desire towards someone, something, etc., the whole idea is like, no, you're getting them wrong. These are people with disabilities. These are nice people. They don't think about such things. And I'm deliberately using all of these words because we still taboo desire. We still have a taboo around desire. We still have a taboo around sexuality. And we still have a taboo around sex. So the whole idea is that, but disabled people equals to asexual, equals to nice people, equals to godlike, and equals to childlike. So within that whole spectrum, it does get complicated. And I would agree with that. But I think it's also the reverse. It's also that disabled people are godlike and childlike, and children do not need to consent. And that brings me back full circle to Subha's point that we don't encourage our children to express their desire. We don't encourage our children to say what they like and what they don't like. Just to circle back with Shubha and Subha for the other comments around. And Shubha, if you'd like to start about what Tripti has specifically asked. Yeah,
sure. Thank you, Tripti, and nice to meet you here. Thank you for the question as well. And like what Nidhi was just saying, if they want to flirt with me, they should find ways, like other ways that I would be able to understand, right? So also all these organization people who wants to get consent from people, and whenever it comes to people with disability, them saying that it's difficult for them to give or deny consent because of lack of accessibility is something they need to fix. If it's actually, like meaningful and then informed consent, because it is like clearly based on medical model of like, okay, this is not done, so that's why we don't have this, and people with disability can't participate, or they can't do this, instead of fixing the whole structure. And also in terms of data, like even for able body, the way our data is being used and the consent that we provide, quote unquote, with our consent is not exactly fully consented, like that's another debate and discussion to be done. But yeah, thank you for the question.
Subha?
Yeah, I mean, thanks so much for raising all those super interesting points. And I mean, I'll just kind of, I just jotted down a few things. So one is that, I think in one of the questions that or comments that were being read out before, and, we have this recurring question around what about people who can't consent or, aren't able to give consent and so on. And, I think we have to be very clear that everyone can give consent, whether or not we are able to design and implement systems and processes from the legal to the social and to the personal, etc., that can recognize different kinds of consent from diverse bodies. That is on us, right? Everybody can consent or not. I mean, that is something that is inherent to each of us. It is tied up with the fact that we all have agency, we all have the ability to make choices, right? So whether you're someone with a disability, or it could be, an intellectual disability, and that's, a group of people that many of us think that, should not be able to give consent, right? Or whether you're a young person under the age of 16 or whatever the age of consent is, depending on your country. Whether you're, in many countries, if you're a prisoner, if you're imprisoned, you legally don't have the ability to give consent. I mean, these are all systemic and structural problems. It is not the fact that some people cannot give consent. No, everybody can give consent, right? Are we listening, and are we able to recognize that as consent is the question. So really the question is, I mean, it's about turning that lens back on the systems of power, right? And saying, we do not accept that there are certain groups of people that do not have the legal right to consent, right? The second thing, Nidhi, is what you were saying about desire, and the whole confusion, is someone flirting, are they not? The point is, desire is messy and it's confusing, and that's okay, right? And I think that's exactly the kind of messiness that we really don't give much space for, unfortunately. We try to make things into neat categories. We try to put things in neat boxes. And I think, again, I'm going to sort of flag our obsession with a very law and order kind of approach in a lot of activism and advocacy that we do. And I think this is one of the limitations that the law and order approach presents us with, that we don't leave room for messiness. And fundamentally, I think we are all very messy beings. And I don't think that any kind of system that can't recognize or make space for that messiness is adequate. Like, it's just not good enough. And finally, I just want to address the issue about data, right? And the protection of our data and so on. And I think, I mean, that is absolutely the point, right? Is to say, of course, our data is not safe in the hands of many corporations or in the hands of many governments. Why would it be? Because our physical bodies are not either, right? So, I mean, again, I think we really have to ask, when we talk about data and consent, I think we really have to ask, what is the paradigm within which we're asking this question about data? Like, are bodies safe, right? Are certain kinds of bodies valued? Are certain kinds of lives valued? Do we really live in a country or in a state or in a world that really, or, you know, do we deal with corporations that genuinely value our physical bodies? Do we deal with corporations that believe that we are autonomous and that we have the right to our bodies? I mean, I think in most contexts, the answer is no. So I think in the way that data is an extension of our physical bodies, I think the way in which corporations or governments will deal with data is also an extension of the paradigm within which we're living.
Thank you so much, both of you, for raising such relevant and really, really interlinked points. And I do want to circle back with the points that both of you made around access and participation and consent, and that everybody has a right to consent. And I think it's very common that we, and I'm saying we, but the larger society, whenever it comes to people with disabilities, accessibility and consent are something that go hand in hand. So lack of accessibility, lack of consent, right? Lack of inclusion, lack of consent. And I'll share a couple of examples here. Lack of empathy, lack of consent. Just lack of accessibility, right? We don't have public spaces accessibility. So we just feel like we could hold somebody and directly help them. Or we feel like it's okay to just lift the wheelchair and put it up if there are 4 steps. You know, it's not a big deal. And so how that's interchanged, because we're like, oh, we're facilitating access. So you know, shove the consent up your wherever. And I'm using such sort of problematic language deliberately because that's the attitude that's exhibited towards people with disabilities. And so it's really, even in the online space, it's basically, oh, we couldn't make our forms accessible. We couldn't make these pieces accessible. Okay, you want access to information around sexual and reproductive health or around abortion, great, but our website isn't accessible. So why don't you call a friend and ask them to read because they're sighted and you're a screen reader user? And so what we do around lack of access and consent is so interesting. Because we just feel like it's okay to compromise because they have a disability, so of course they need support. But the onus is constantly saying, yeah, but you need the access, so you don't now throw tantrums around consent, right? It's really, it reminds me, it may not be the best sort of way to equate things, but it's about, oh, you know, women, we're letting you go out and work, so now you ensure that you do double the work because you should take care of your office since you're committed. And of course, your housework continues. But we are allowing you to go out. So this is all, the burden of all of this falls on you. I think it's really this whole shifting of burden and whose onus is it is very important. Lack of inclusion leads to lack of consent. Because again, you know, when you don't include people, you don't think their consent matters. It's really serious because when we think about lack of consent, we're not talking about relationships. We're not talking about sex. We're talking about forcefully terminating a pregnancy of a woman with a disability. We're talking about forceful institutionalization because we feel like their consent is not important. They're all quote unquote mad or live with a psychosocial disability. So I think consent is a very important piece and language in the disability rights, and to come down to a very basic thing, saying, oh, but do you want to have food? And I'm like, yes, I want to have 2 things out of the 15 laid out in the buffet. And then somebody serves 5 and says, no, but they're good, so we brought it for you. So it's either your decision to waste food, which you don't like to do, or it's just somebody helps you. So it's okay if you said no to the rest. You should really take it. I think this consent as a daily living, you know, we all navigate consent in our daily lives. It's just that we don't, in some of our lives and realities, we don't realize how much we navigate consent. And I think that's really important to keep in mind about this. And just, you know, everything is not a violation. Everything is not law. Like Subha is saying, it does not have to be saying, oh, you know, it needs to, consent needs to become positively a part of our life rather than sort of, oh, if you violate this, then you're penalized, and hence you should not violate it. I think the whole idea of positive consent, I think that's the term that the film uses in a sexual and relationship context. But I think that's really a thing that we should all do, no matter how much we feel it's for the benefit of the others, because that's the language that disability rights always sees, saying, hello, but we're helping you. It's okay if we held your hand instead of your elbow, or it's okay if we pulled you by the waist, and we couldn't from across the room tell you we are here because you're blind. So it's okay if we came and grabbed you. I don't think that works. So just to also, I think that the thin veneer, or the veneer that we constantly put around acts of violation, and we constantly shove the onus on the vulnerable person, is something that I wanted to highlight here. And for us to reflect and become even more conscious. I wanted to get slightly back to, I don't know if there are more comments. Srinidhi, please stop me at any point and share more comments. I have a question specifically around, again, going back to the films and talking about, the conversations and the debates that the Me Too movement brought forward, because the conversation was all about, but this person cannot be the perpetrator because they're so nice otherwise, right? They're a fantastic actor, or they're a brilliant judge, or they've been so socially conscious, and they're a great development sector professional. And this constant sort of pressure of, I don't know how to frame it, but again, the truth being established by the person who shares the experience of violence. I think just if you could shed some light on that, and then we'll come to the closing thoughts.
Yeah, that's a very important discussion to actually have. It's also like how whenever, like Me Too as a movement, it has been there, people coming out and then saying that this is the person who violated me in certain ways. It's always been there, but this actually has given a lot of boost in the name of Me Too, and because it was online and a lot of people across the countries, across the region participated, so it was really huge. But at the same time, how it went to the national level discourse was really interesting to see when it was happening. So I can give you a small example from Nepal. So when all these, so when in India, the list of professors was released online for being sexual predators. So there was one of the case here as well. 3 students from a public university said that a professor was abusing them when they were students, and this professor also happened to be in indigenous movement. So what the indigenous movement did was they actually blamed these women, like 3 students, saying that, oh, they're actually jeopardizing our movement itself, and it's actually a blame for this professor because he's a pillar to our movement. So indigenous movement didn't support it. Indigenous women movement didn't support them either. The mainstream women's movement that we call mainstream, they were not exactly interested either. So who were making noise were like people like us who were online, like, who people call like Twitter activism or whatever, Twitter activists. So that's why it didn't, even the cases that came forward didn't get a lot of highlight. That is one. The other thing was also this whole pressure from media and other civil society group to women saying that, okay, this is the right time to bring all the stories and all the pain, and then bring out the people who have been sexual predators. And again, putting the pressure on victims and survivors, saying that, okay, you need to tell people your stories, all the pain that you have gone through. It has to be public, because their whole idea was the iron is really hot, so we have to hammer it where it's already happening in India or elsewhere. And whereas we all know, like the system that we have in terms of mental health support, in terms of physical safety, like it doesn't exist. So even if the stories would have come out, and even the stories that have come out, the people did not exactly get support. So there was all this kind of small things that were happening that didn't actually got into the larger conversation. The whole thing was around, okay, when you have to name and shame these people and it has to be brought to the justice, whereas we all know how our justice system and how our legal system works and how it does not actually favors people who are in marginalized community or who are already marginalized. So yeah.
So much, Shubha. I think those are some excellent points, and I'll use it in the closing remark. Subha, can I please move to you to just have some reflections on this? And Srinidhi, I'm going to come to you as well. I'll start the closing remarks from you. I know there wasn't an opportunity to ask for remarks before, but just, yeah, Subha, over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the question of the perpetrator is very interesting, and I do think that that's one of the really remarkable things that the global Me Too movement did, was that I do think that it significantly shifted the conversation about who the perpetrator is, right? Because I think really, if you think about it, we lived in a world, before Me Too, we lived in a world where we also really, many of us ourselves were guilty of kind of having this very normative idea about who the perpetrator is. They, these kinds of, this kind of, the picture of the perpetrator in our head was really shaped by very normative, class-based kinds of stereotypes, or class or caste-based stereotypes, for example, right? We always thought of the perpetrator as being somehow outside our community, outside our home, outside in, not of us. And I think that is really one of the remarkable things that it did. For all its limitations, I do really kind of find myself quite floored by the shift in the conversation in terms of the fact that we now really understand, at least at some level, that, quote unquote perpetrators are not these strangers, they're not these monsters, they're not, these people that are outside of us, but they are actually very much inside, right? They are inside our homes, they're inside our workplaces, they're inside our communities. And I think that helps to, again, I think it helps to disrupt this kind of dichotomy between victim, perpetrator. I mean, like Shubha was saying right at the start, like this language around victim, perpetrator, like we need to kind of get past that. We need to find a different language of addressing why sexual assault happens, why violations of consent happen. And the fact that, I think the toughest question or the toughest thing that we do have to face is that it is coming from people that we know, that we trust, that we think are our friends or our relatives, our co-workers, our bosses, and so on. And I think that is something that we really have to sit with, because I think if we really sit with that question, I think we will find that we can't really walk away with this very simplistic understanding of, oh, I am a victim and this person was a perpetrator. Like, I think we will find that that analysis is not going to get us far, and it's wholly inadequate. And I think, again, it sort of forces us to reflect on what we are as a society and the fact that we produce this violence, right? We produce the violence, we produce the victim, and we produce the perpetrator, all of it. So, and I think, if we really sit with that discomfort of who's the perpetrator, I think that's when we can really start to have a constructive approach to taking collective action, collective responsibility as well as collective action in terms of restoring and healing from the harm that's been done.
Great. Thank you so much, both. Shri, if there were any points that we've missed, if you'd like to share any thoughts, we have about 8 minutes left. So after you, I'll just come to the two speakers if they have any closing remarks, and I'll leave with a closing remark of my own. Shri?
No,
Yeah.
I just had somebody has raised their hand in case they want to speak.
Yes.
Yeah, can I?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, this is Syed. On the outset, I want to appreciate the effort, and I'm actually a visually challenged person. and I really felt happy to listen to it. And mine was not a question. I just want to give a comment. There is a case called Anna's double field. It would be an interesting thing because it subverts the consent non-consent dichotomy. It's like she can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, she is a professor, philosophy professor, and she's normal. She had a severely disabled student, and they had a sexual relationship, it seems. And she says he actually gave his consent by some means, like through keyboard or something. It's not like verbal or non-verbal. So there, the dichotomy actually shifts when it comes to consent and non-consent. So I think if you're really interested, you can go ahead and see. Some people in Facebook called her hero. Anna is my hero because she subverted, but I don't feel it's consent. So maybe that would be for a good discussion if you take it up. Anna Stubblefield. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing, Sir. I mean, I think I just wanted to say something that somebody has said on the Sarita has mentioned on the chat box, which is about consent becoming more complicated, because of technology, etc. But I think that the interesting one of the things that I do think that we are in danger of not paying attention to is how intimacy could be established only through technology and no physical contact. So the idea then of consent changes entirely because of all the other complications that arise, especially in times like now when people are social.
Hi, 1 second. Hi, can I please request you to mute yourself?
Yeah, I think the idea of how do we talk about consent when it is not only in a quote-unquote physical domain, and what that means to us is something I feel we are not talking about enough, especially with regards to people with disabilities.
Right. Thank you so much, Nadi. I think that's a very important thing about people with disabilities not just having digital consent is equal. Like sometimes we just forget, we're like, everything's inaccessible, let them be online. All their relationships happen online, they rarely get to meet. So there's a lot of difficulty around that, right? Can I please request I think and we'll have to unpack that quite a bit, Shri. So unfortunately we're running out of time, but it's important to keep disability and the complicated nature of consent, not just because people think we don't have the right to consent, but it's also how much, if you need daily living support, how much is it your consent? The carer has a particular time and they just want to do things for you the way and when they want to do. Very seldom it's consent is taken into consideration. Just last a minute each, Subha and Shubha, if I can come back to you for any closing thoughts.
Just wanted to add on what Srinidhi was saying, of having consent in both digital and like in real life situation, but also talking about consent not just in sexual consent kind of setting, but in other kind of settings as well. So it doesn't become only sexual conversation, need of sexual conversation. And that is why people are so reluctant now, because it's linked to only sex. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Shubha. I think it's so important because this is what everyday living for people with disabilities, as we've been seeing, it's just so important to have consent in those spaces. I think for all of us, I think we just don't realize that our daily lives is negotiating, lives are about negotiating consent. Subha, can I come to you for some last thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just will kind of add to that very sort of important point that Shubha just raised as well, that, of course, consent is not just about sex. And as you just said, Nidhi, we consent to things or not all day long, right? Every day. And I just want to remind us that it's really at the end of the day, I think that it's really about power, right? And it's about how we locate consent within a larger conversation about power and who has power and who doesn't. And again, I think we have to keep, saying, we have to keep demanding that systems of power and people who have power hear us on the fact that the nature of consent is that we are, that the ability to consent is inherent to all of us, just like the nature of agency, right? It is not something that can be given to me. It is not something that needs to be given to me. I don't need to be given anyone's permission to consent or not. I don't need for the government of the state to tell me that I can legally consent or I cannot legally consent. So I think, we have to keep bringing it, back to the question of power. And I think we have to understand consent within that larger framework.
That's brilliant. I'll just link my closing remark to something that you just said and what Shubha said earlier. The question of power. And the idea of that good people, and I think Shubha gave the example of the indigenous community, the person from the indigenous community, circling back to disability rights group. And when the whole Me Too movement was happening within India, there was only one woman. So for a very long time, women with disabilities did not speak up. And there wasn't a lot of discomfort amongst anybody. Nobody said, but why are women with disabilities? Like, are there no cases? Is there no space for them to speak up? Are they not occupying these spaces? Once those conversations started, I remember the first or the only person from India from the disability rights space, a woman with a disability who's outed her sort of, or who joined the Me Too movement and shared one of her experience around abuse and violence, or harassment and abuse. And it was a man with a disability. And it was very tough because I don't think it was a man with a disability. So the feminist groups did not pay enough attention or even raise that or even have collective outrage like they were having on other experiences. There was not a lot of show of solidarity from the feminist movement. Having said that, the disability rights movement still, although the person wasn't named, the person was in a prominent enough position and the position was described that many of us from the disability movement know who this person is. It was also very not such a happy space for me to see that the disability movement did not continue to respect, continue to work, and continues to respect and work with this person. It's not to say that one person's experience needs to shape all your choices. It's up to you. But I think there was solidarity is not just by private messaging. I think all of us acknowledging together that whoever the person may be, a violation of consent is a problem. When somebody says that this was harassment, the onus of proving it should not be on that person, particularly with all the vulnerabilities that, the groups that come with vulnerabilities and marginalized positions in society. I think it's really time for us to acknowledge that in our everyday lives, we're navigating consent. It's time for us to acknowledge that when you don't respect people's consent or you feel like they cannot give consent, it is not just a legal violation, it's traumatizing for the person as well. It remains his experience. We also need to acknowledge that once we understand consent, we're actually shaping a society which would be better, which would be more interesting, more exciting, more sexy, as Subha says, but also just more humane. And I'd leave with that thought. I just want to thank our speakers, Shubha and Subha. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for sharing your thoughts. I really want to acknowledge each one of you here on the call and some of those who had to leave. We're really sorry. The discussions were so interesting that we've 30 minutes over time, which is we generally have our calls 3:30 to 5. We're at 5:30 India time. I really want to appreciate all your interest and your collective thinking and reflections. So thank you everyone who's joined us from all across the globe. Thank you to the Rising Flame team. Thank you, Srinadi, and thank you, Arjita. Chika's not on this call. Thanks to her as well. And we'll see you next week with the podcast Fatso, with some interesting discussions about body diversity, body shaming, and what it means in an inclusive world. Thank you and stay tuned. We'll communicate through social media, through emails, and through WhatsApps about the link for our next week's program, Vella Panti Session 3, next week on body diversity. Look forward to seeing all of you there. Thank you and have a pleasant weekend. Stay safe, stay connected.
Thank you for watching. Please do like, share and subscribe and click the bell button for updates. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, or visit our website to know more about our work. Links in the description.